When I started working on the outline for this video, my goal for this video was really to make you just as prepared, just as knowledgeable as somebody that lives here in rural Southwest Colorado. Somebody that really already lives here, has lived here for years, and really understands things like the roads, things like the weather, things like what it's like from a utility standpoint. We'll dive into all of those things and many, many more details. We'll give you some examples of other clients that I've worked with, even very recently, go over some of the things that they pointed out when they saw the property, go over some reasons they decided not to buy certain properties, and much, much more. We will also make sure to kind of point out some differences, really big differences between living here to, let's say, within 10 minutes of downtown Durango. And some things that area really does have in common with out here, and just those slight subtle changes, slight differences that you might need to make. Quick example, and we'll dive into this more, is the weather. Some areas of rural Durango and rural Southwest Colorado get a lot more snow, some areas don't. Regardless, most areas you're gonna have longer, maybe steeper, not necessarily steeper, driveways, and you're gonna have to figure out how to plow those. But some areas in town have the same issue, or they're at higher elevation. So some of those areas that are even closer to in-town Durango have even more snow. So it's not that one is worse or better, you just wanna really compare and contrast, and we're gonna make sure to do that in this video. Let's jump into it. Now, some of the things we're gonna be talking about are self-sufficiency, emergency preparedness, as well as cell signals. So the first one let's dive into is actually gonna be the challenges of the weather, like I mentioned in the intro of this video. Now guys, as much as I love shooting these videos, I even love more helping you with your real estate needs. So if you're even thinking about moving out this direction, give me a call, text, or email. Days, nights, weekends, love to help you. And we'd be more than happy to just hop on a call, go over your criteria, go over what you're looking for, and just help you kind of filter out some of the pros and cons of what you're looking at, show you some of the pros and cons of different areas you're looking at, just kind of give you a personalized tour of Durango via phone call, Zoom call, or even in person if you come out here. And we actually just closed on 2 properties last week with 2 different clients that reached out because they saw these videos. So I'd love to work with you guys as well. Let's jump back into the video. So let's kind of talk about that a little bit and split apart the areas around Durango. Now, in town Durango, you're gonna get close to the least amount of snow, followed by southern Durango. So southern Durango is gonna kind of dip in elevation just by a little bit, by a couple hundred feet or so. You get slightly less snow south of Durango. Now, not all the time, depending on the storm, but generally a little bit less snow. Then as we go west and east from downtown Durango by about 15 minutes, you start climbing in elevation each direction. So about a 15-minute drive from in-town Durango going east and west, you start to get close to 7,500 feet elevation, which is about 1,000 feet higher elevation than in-town Durango. So going each direction, you're gonna get quite a bit more snow. It could be 50 to 100% more snow going each direction. Then as you get close to the same distance, a little bit further out, about 20 minutes north of downtown Durango, it continues to climb as well. 31 minutes from downtown Durango is Purgatory Ski Resort, which is, I want to say, about 3,000 feet higher in elevation compared to downtown Durango. So of course they're getting quite a bit more snow than going east or west, but we'll mainly focus on east or west, east, west, and south of downtown Durango, because that's going to be, to me, considered more rural. Now, you are going to get bigger acreage in these areas, so we'll dive into that a little bit more, but where I'm going with that is going to be the longer driveways. Typically going to have longer driveways with bigger acreage properties, of course. So really, I want to make sure you guys are aware that you're either going to want to get a plow to put on the end of your truck or SUV, or you're going to want to get an ATV, Polaris, etc., one of these types of vehicles with a plow on the end of it. Now, you always do have the option to just pay somebody to plow your driveway, but I recommend in a pinch you have something so that you can plow to get out if you need it for an emergency. If you get 2 feet of snow and you really need to get out of your driveway, I still really recommend you have something, even if you pay somebody to plow your driveway. Now, some of the other issues with weather can be losing power. Now, I really want you guys to be aware that having a generator is worth it. Like, I don't think everybody necessarily has a generator that lives in rural Colorado, but I think it's important and at least something to just put on your radar, look into, research, hey, should I have this? Depending on where you're living, is that a concern? We had our power go out a couple weeks ago, and we don't live far from town. We live about 12 minutes from town, and it went out for maybe 6 hours. So not a big deal, but it does go out occasionally, especially as you get further away from town. Just depends on the situation, depends on the weather. You just never know. So you want to be a little bit more prepared because you are further from emergency services, and you just want to take those kind of things into consideration. You also want to take into consideration your distance from the hospital and your distance from fire. That also comes into play with insurance, and we'll talk about that a little bit more a little later. Now, the other thing to really be cautious of is road access. Now, we do a really good job of plowing the roads out here in Durango and just the surrounding areas as well. Even as you get 10, 20, 30 minutes away from downtown Durango, they do a phenomenal job of plowing the roads, but you always want to be aware of where you're living specifically. So if you're in an HOA, you want to make sure that that HOA covers snow plowing, and pretty much 100% of the time it does. But just talk to the HOA. Hey, when does the snowplow come by our neighborhood? Oh, it's around 8 a.m. or it's around 7 a.m. So if you have to go to work, you really have a good understanding of that. And you have a good understanding of when the snowplow comes by, usually they actually push snow into your driveway. And if you've already plowed your driveway, now you got to plow it again, and it's not as much snow, but you got to get that snow out of the way. So that's something that a lot of people don't realize. From there, you also want to be aware of the road conditions. So when it snows and then it gets colder after it snows, the day after. So it could sit right at 30 and get colder and then freeze even if it's nice and sunny, and it could get icier out. So just being prepared as well with things in your car. Having chains, having some water, having a sleeping bag, being prepared in case you do go off the side of the road. And you don't see it often, but it does happen. Being able to call AAA sounds easy in theory, but what if you're in a part of town where you don't have signal? There are parts of town, especially the area from between Durango and Vallecito Lake, that don't have signal. I have considered getting WeBoost to see if that works, but I've been told that that won't work. It'll only work if you already have like 1 bar or 2 bars, and it'll extend your service better. But I don't think it works if you don't have any signal at all. Feel free to correct me in the comments or shoot me a text if that's incorrect. I'm still learning on that, but I just want you guys to be aware of first, things like utilities, but then being able to get out on the road as well as knowing about signal. So kind of think worst case scenario, will I live between a dead spot and where I travel to frequently? And is there a different route? So for example, Forest Lakes is a good example. Forest Lakes is over in Bayfield. It is their biggest subdivision. I actually have a video on it. We'll actually put the thumbnail up on the screen. Driving from there to downtown Durango, there are 2 different routes. And there's one route that's much easier to get cell phone signal going on Highway 160 versus going on County Road 240. So keep in mind the different routes that you can maybe take to get to town. Keep in mind just being prepared, having things in your car. And I also just recommend having a 4-wheel drive vehicle. Almost no matter where you're going to live in Durango, I suggest it. If you're right in town Durango, I don't think it's a must, but I do think it's important. Now, yesterday I went for a walk with my 3-year-old son. We were looking for deer. Had an awesome time. He was talking about T-Rexes. We were looking for T-Rexes. We had to be quiet. It was a lot of fun. But why I bring up that story is I want to point out to you guys, we were walking around in mud the whole time. He had his boots on. He was like, Dad, I just got stuck. And so I want to give you that story to say, you could look behind me right here and see the mud right here. I'm filming this video at the end of February. We're starting to get into that springtime. You get a lot of mud. We call this kind of the mud season. So you really have trails that are actually closed off where you can't go biking because we don't want to mess up the trails and have all these ruts. But you have the same with these back roads in rural Durango where it'll be big ruts of mud and you can get stuck in the mud. So just be aware of that being something that with any dirt roads comes mud. And also in the winter, you'll have kind of these tracks where the tires will go in. And as that starts to melt, the snow starts to melt, it just turns into mud. So again, having 4-wheel drive, being prepared, and then even having tracks where you can put them under your car. We'll put a picture of those on the screen. I might not be saying the correct word, but we'll put those up on the screen. Having those so you can get out of the mud or the snow, which they're mainly made for snow, but they can help you in mud as well, is a good idea too. Now, just briefly going back to what I was talking about roads. So there are private roads versus county maintained roads. You want to be aware of that when you're looking at different subdivisions at different neighborhoods. Not all rural roads are plowed or maintained by the county. Then some homes require shared private road maintenance, which means you and your neighbors handle plowing. So I have seen quite frequently actually where there is a agreement between a neighbor where they're agreeing to plow that road. So there might be just 2 homes at the end of a road, and maybe that road's a mile long, and you're agreeing to either share the cost, or you both plow it, or maybe you just work out some sort of agreement, and that agreement is being passed on to you from the seller. So that is fairly common, especially with neighborhoods where there's 5 homes or 10 homes. And I've seen other neighborhoods where one owner will just plow, and hey, John's great, he plows, he gets up at 6 in the morning and plows, and that's just kind of a verbal agreement. So you also want to be cognizant of that when you're going in to look at properties, and just ask that question. When I'm showing you properties, just ask me and I'll get you the documentation on that, make sure that's in writing and we know what's going on there. Now the next thing with dirt roads is the obvious, is your car is always going to be dirty. So watch out for that. I've had clients come to me and just say, hey, we're just not willing to live on a dirt road because of that reason. Along with that is there's some even worse things in that. Gravel roads equals rock chips on windshields as well as flat tires. So I've experienced this personally myself, not the flat tires, but more so the rock chips. I've got an FJ Cruiser and you get those dang rock chips all the time, especially with that flatter windshield. But even if you don't, my wife has a 4Runner and we experienced that with the 4Runner as well, just driving in Durango on those dirt roads a lot. Then that spring thaw, that mud season, I did just discuss that. Car washes, you know, as soon as you wash it, you drive back on your road and it's dirty again. So you guys are aware of that, but I just want to bring that to the front of your mind. Mud flaps, rock resistant windshields really help. Always carry a spare tire and roadside repair kit. So of course we've got people like AAA and things like that, but I still really recommend you being prepared as well. Again, you never know if you're going to be in an area where you don't have signal, and just kind of thinking about the worst. Hey, what if the weather's bad? What if it's hard for somebody to get to me? What if I don't have cell signal like I mentioned? And so again, just being aware of those things. Going into cell signal and just staying connected. I mentioned earlier the area, kind of the biggest area where you don't get cell signal. The other area is County Road 141, also known as Wildcat Canyon, that's going west of Durango. So there's one road west, one road east, and then there are quite a few other just little dead spots going out towards Hesperus, going south of town. There are quite a few little spots, but not any real big spots. And then in the Animas Valley, it is kind of spotty as well. It's a valley, you've got ridges on both sides of you. So just be aware that kind of throughout, you're not gonna always have the best signal. Now to continue talking about cell signal, I also wanna talk about internet. So I do recommend considering getting Starlink. So Starlink is great. Had Starlink come out and install it into one of my clients' homes. They were talking about the speed being 3-4x what they're used to. They were telling him how great it was. Then I tested Starlink at my house compared to the internet that I have, and it was literally 10 times faster than the internet at my house. So just want to give you some comparison there, some understanding. Then if you have a well and you don't have power, this is just going back to power outages, you won't have water. So be cognizant of that. Solar and battery backups are something I also recommend looking into. Wood stoves as a heat source, or just look into having the right type of electric stove. If you have an electric stove and it is made for kind of like off-grid living, then that should work as well. Now the next thing I want to talk about is really going to apply to just about everywhere around Durango, but definitely more so in the rural parts of Durango. So that's going to be wildlife and living with nature, and just kind of the changes that you need to make for maybe coming from a bigger town where you don't need to deal with bears, coyotes, mountain lions, things like that. So the first item on the list is going to be black bears. They are attracted to human food, and so you want to make sure to keep your trash cans in the garage, or at least having a bear-proof trash can set up. My parents have a trash can that locks, and then we put our trash cans inside our garage and then bring them out on the morning of trash day. Also bird feeders. You want to be careful with bird feeders and leaving pet food outside, mainly hummingbird feeders, but also you want to be careful with just regular bird feeders as well. Then mountain lions. I personally haven't seen a mountain lion since I've lived here for almost 5 years. We've seen a few bears between my wife and I in the entire 5 years we've lived here, so both of them are not a major concern, but you do want to be very cognizant. I also want to mention regarding bear spray. I do recommend going for walks with bear spray, or at least having some sort of bear spray just in general. There's a few different kinds out there. Definitely look into the different kinds out there, as well as walking with someone. You know, really just making noise regarding mountain lions or bears are going to really help you prevent any bear attacks or mountain lion attacks attacks generally if you kind of study that and look into how those work. Mountain lions, installing tall, secure fencing around properties to deter mountain lions, using outdoor lighting to reduce hiding spots near homes, and then your pets. You really want to supervise your pets when it comes to mountain lions. Don't leave them out there at night, and that goes the same with coyotes. Coyotes are highly adaptable, can thrive in different environments, and they will look for smaller dogs, cats, and that kind of thing as well. And a quick story for you. I have a friend that lives in town, Durango, and they came home at night at about 7, maybe 8 o'clock at night, and there was a black bear on their back deck. So again, leaving food outside is a big reason that black bears are attracted to your yard specifically, so be careful with that. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is fire risk, fire danger, and insurance goes along with that. So I'll hit on insurance first. There's a lot of different ways we could take the conversation with insurance, but I'll just say that a lot of these insurance companies, really all of them, have a mapping system that basically shows them where it's more likely for the fire to climb and hit a certain home. And so in any neighborhood where, like, let's take Edgemont, for example. In a neighborhood where there might be 1,000 homes or 500 homes, there could be 300 or 400 where they'll insure them and another 100 where they won't. So there might be one home next to the next where they won't insure it. And there's certain reasons for that. So you want to definitely talk to an insurance company. What I normally recommend regarding insurance is talk to your insurance company about the property you're looking at before you even take a look at it. If you're really serious, you really like the home, of course. So what I typically tell clients as they're coming out here to look at properties regarding insurance is, if you have a few properties really high on that list, talk to your insurance agent first about those properties. If they say no, they won't insure it, give me a call. I'll refer you several companies. And typically what I've seen is one insurance company will say no, the next one will be pretty high. We've had companies even say as high as $35,000. This was for a property that was over $2 million. And then we've had a company come down and say they're at $4 grand if you bundle with them. So it really depends. There's some companies that'll just say no, and you might want to move on. You might feel like the risk is too high, and then some will get you down quite a bit lower and say, but you've got to cut down the trees within 10 feet of the home. You've got to do certain things. Now, jumping back into specifics about fires. We had several fires, one in June of 2018 and then another in June of 2002. So just want to give you those examples just to show you that it is very real risk out here. The 416 fire in 2018, 54,000 acres, evacuated more than 1,300 people, and that was up here in the Readiness Valley where I'm standing right now. That was actually in this area right behind me. Evacuated Purgatory Ski Resort, damaged Durango and Silverton narrow gauge railroad, cost over $43 million to contain. And then we had another one actually over, I'll turn around, and it was on those ridges right behind me here, Missionary Ridge fire. And it was 73,000 acres, destroyed 46 homes and cabins, and it moved quickly across dry, steep terrain. So just want to really paint that picture that it is a really real concern. And then dive into a little bit more specifics. They kind of look at zones around your home. So really zone 1 and zone 2, 0 to 30 feet, and then 30 to 100. So just keeping that first area really well irrigated, remove dead vegetation, space out trees and shrubs. And you just kind of want to pull up that canopy so there's not a lot of shrubs and leaf vegetation near the ground. And there's some great companies that can do that for you. I've got some great references, so reach out to me. I can refer you some great companies. My parents were actually just having somebody do that on their property, and it looks really amazing. They really thinned it out nicely, and it just makes the land a lot more usable as well. Now with that, really briefly, I want to mention just having an emergency kit. You know, prepare a kit with essentials like food, medication, important documents, kind of having a go bag, just a bag that's just set aside for you just to grab it, be able to throw it in the car and go, and you just know that it has the essentials in it that you need. And then just being prepared in general, because what if there is a fire and you're stuck and you're trying to get home or you're trying to get to a certain destination? And just again, kind of going back to the concern with snow in general and just being prepared. You're living out here in the mountains, so having stuff like a sleeping bag, water, food, just in your car in general. Those are just all around emergency preparedness tips, but I really like to point those out in my videos, especially if you're coming from somewhere where you don't, you have a lot more amenities and emergency services. And then just having a communication plan with your family and just staying informed. Regarding weather in general, this isn't specific to fire, but regarding weather in general, I always recommend the Durango weather guy. He has a blog blog on his website. It's just durangoweatherguy.com. Now, I just had a client ask me about hunting on their own property. They're looking at a property that is around 200 acres. And so I just want to dive into just being able to hunt on your own property if you're living in rural Southwest Colorado. So owning rural land in Durango doesn't grant unrestricted hunting rights. So Colorado has specific regulations to ensure safety and wildlife conservation. So you're still required to obtain the proper license and tag for the species that you're intending to hunt. You've got to complete hunter's education course, which is mandatory for first-time hunters. I actually just completed this. If you're a vet, you can actually complete this online and don't have to go in person. Just a quick tip for you. Otherwise, it is just a pretty short, I think it's like a half day or even less, a few hours in person, and pretty easy. And then some of the limitations to hunting on your property is gonna be, is there a conservation easement going through the property? So you can reach out to me. I have map overlays where I can pull that up and get accurate information on that. And then you also wanna look into HOAs. Are you in an HOA? You wanna make sure to read into their documents, what their documents say. Again, just reach out to me. I can get you that information. And the next point is make sure you have proper access to adjacent national forest lands. Some really amazing property out here that backs up to national forest, and you might be looking at some of that. So just make sure you have proper access to that. For the most part, you probably will if you're backing up right to it, but you just want to be careful and be sure of that. Now, the other common question I get is when I'm looking at bigger acreage property with clients is they're asking, what is the community like around me? Can I connect with people that I live next to? And overall, I would say yes. I would say it's pretty easy. Now, of course, if you're looking at a 500-acre property, yes, you're of course way more spread out from your neighbors. But I would say for the most part, if you're looking at, let's just say under 100-acre type property, I'd say for the most part, people are really awesome out here. The community is really good. I would say just plugging into local clubs, local events. There's always a lot of stuff going on in and around Durango from just so many different things, right? And so I think just getting plugged in, finding a way to plug in, maybe going to the gym, going to the rec center, just finding different ways to meet people is really helpful. But if we look at properties like Durango Ridge Ranch, where they're 35-acre properties, although those are big, I've got a client that moved there, or clients that moved there recently, and they felt like they've really plugged in and met a lot of neighbors, and they have a lot of good get-togethers and things like that. And I've seen that with a lot of other neighborhoods as well. So overall, I think you're gonna have a good time or an easy time finding community in and around Durango. Now, another reason some of my clients don't like to live in more rural type properties is a lot of them are going to have propane instead of natural gas. So you're either gonna have propane above ground or a buried propane tank, and you're gonna have a company come out and fill up that propane tank every 6 months to a year, just depending on the size of the propane tank. Now, I definitely just recommend either looking into if that's owned or leased and just exploring if that's something that you're open to. You know, I don't personally think it's a big deal, but you just wanna look into that and just realize that that is something that comes with having a more rural off-grid type property, and not necessarily just off-grid, but just more rural type property. The next thing I wanna dive into are wells, cisterns, and water filtration. So I'm gonna look down at my notes a little bit here just to make sure I cover everything, but we've got private wells as well as cisterns out here quite a bit. And if you see a cistern or you find a cistern in the description of a property, it doesn't mean that there's issues with the well. It doesn't mean that they don't have good water, but let's dive into a little bit more of those details. All right, so we're gonna kind of start with the basics of a well, just go over those real quick. So a well is drilled into the ground to access underground aquifers, and a pump brings the water to the surface for the household. So key considerations, so well depth and flow rate. Wells in Durango and the surrounding mountains can range from 100 feet or even less to about 1,000 plus feet, depending on where you're at. So the flow rate, gallons per minute or GPM is crucial. 5+ gallons per minute is ideal, but I will say I've seen quite a few, or a good handful of wells that are 3+ gallons, and the well company DAK Drilling is the one that I've used quite a bit for inspections, have still said, hey, this well is still really good, still flowing well once it's over 3. So a lower yield is really that 1 to 3 range and typically requires storage solutions. So I'm going to show a property today that has 2 cisterns or holding tanks in the garage as kind of a backup for those lower producing wells. So they'll fill up those cisterns in the garage, and then the water from there will be pumped into the home. So if there is any issue with the well, then you can fill up those cisterns in the garage, have a company come and fill those up, or you could do it yourself. So they do typically recommend annual testing for bacteria, nitrates, arsenic, and other contaminants. Some areas of Colorado have high mineral content, iron, manganese, hardness, which may require filtration or water softeners. You do do see a lot of properties out here as you're looking at them that do already have water softeners. So that's really nice to see. Radon and uranium can be concerns in some wells due to Durango's mountainous geology as well. So just getting a well tested and getting the water tested is the thing that I recommend. I wouldn't be too concerned about this. I wouldn't necessarily be worried about looking for a home that doesn't have a well by any means. I think wells are great, and it's really just coming down to filtration, just getting that water tested, and just going through the proper steps. And you're looking at somewhere around $1,000 for that well test. Well permits and legal restrictions. So some wells are household use only, meaning no outdoor irrigation or livestock watering. And you should always request well permits and past water test records before purchasing a home in general if it has a well. And I'll of course help facilitate that and get those documents to you. Then along the lines of talking about cisterns, we were more talking about those for lower producing wells, but cisterns can also be used for drought years where lower water tables reduce the water that you can pull from that well. So you might want to have a cistern if you're just looking at a certain area, maybe closer to Hesperus, or areas that are just drier, maybe closer to the airport. There's certain areas that you just get further south, further southeast, just kind of spots where it just gets drier. And so considering that cistern could be worth it. And it doesn't mean you need to think that, oh, I'm never, this well is going to dry up necessarily, but talking to the well company, talking to DAK Drilling, and just getting the records of that well are going to be really important. A pressure tank inside the home regulates water pressure. These can last 7 to 10 years. Submersible pump inside the well lasts 10 to 15 years before needing to be replaced. And then sediment buildup or bacteria contamination can occur over time, which requires shock chlorination or filtration upgrades. Just want to cover a little bit of information about well equipment and maintenance there. All right, now let's actually dive a little bit more into cisterns. So a cistern is a large underground or above ground water storage tank. Like I mentioned earlier, 500 to 5,000 plus gallons. You're typically seeing them around 500 to 1,000. Water can come from a low producing well, which slowly fills the tank over time, or you could haul water delivered by a truck from local water providers. And we do have some really good companies here that do haul water. So if you're concerned about that, where am I going to get the water? And you're looking at a property that hauls water, there are some good companies out here that do that. Rainwater collection systems, though not common in Colorado due to legal restrictions, are another way to get water in that cistern. So some key considerations: water hauling. If you're relying on water hauling, expect to pay around 100 to 200 per delivery for 1,000 to 2,000 gallons. And then storage tank maintenance. Cisterns must be cleaned periodically to prevent bacterial or algae growth. Some tanks are made of concrete, plastic, or fiberglass. I'm typically seeing the more plastic ones is what I've seen. And then even homes with good wells sometimes install cisterns in case of emergencies. So I did mention this earlier. I want to give you guys a quick story. Property I showed recently A property I showed recently over in Destination Ranch had a part to it that was actually chewed up by a bear. Part of the holding tank was chewed up by the bear, and so they actually put some cisterns, or at least one cistern I believe, in a room in the house so that they were safe and they never had to worry about if there were any issues with bears or just any issues in general. Now, one more reason to have a cistern is just to have a backup water supply. So even homes with good wells sometimes install cisterns for emergency storage, just like I mentioned. Then gravity-fed cisterns can still provide water during power outages, while wells with electric pumps won't work without a generator. So going back to just being prepared and having a generator, I do recommend that, but I also think having a cistern is a great backup as well. And then just jumping into filtration. I do really recommend having that filtration. There's some water that's going to contain minerals, bacteria, or sediment. And so removing that dirt, sand, debris first. And then if your well produces cloudy water or sediment buildup, it's worth having that sediment filter. And then next is a carbon filter. So it removes chlorine, bad taste, and some organic chemicals, good for improving taste. And then a water softener to remove hard minerals, calcium, manganese, which is commonly here in Durango due to naturally hard water. Then a few other filters are going to be UV water purification to kill bacteria and viruses. The next is going to be reverse osmosis to remove heavy metals, arsenic, fluoride, and uranium, and then radon or uranium filtration as well. So I do recommend looking into Berkey. Berkey is just a filter that we have on the top of our counter. We just fill that up with our water and then just filter our drinking water that way. That's kind of a cheaper way to do it, but doing a whole home filtration system is something I really recommend as well. And just recommend looking into that. You're looking in the $1,000 to $2,000 range, and then you're just replacing small filters that pop in there. So you're not replacing that entire system for 20, 30 years is what I've learned. All right, the next thing you're gonna see really commonly in rural homes is gonna be septic systems. Now, instead of me just talking to you about septic systems, I'm gonna actually interview Aaron over at Mountain Septic, and he's gonna tell you all about septic systems. We're gonna just ask him some of the commonly asked questions, some of the questions I get from my clients all the time, so that you can hear it from an expert. Let's roll that clip now.
A lot of times the issue is, say it's, you know, a 3-acre parcel and only like a 1/4 acre is really flat and buildable. So now the question is, well, do you use that for your septic or you use that for the house? You know, with that said, simply speaking, pretty much any property, I'd say almost any property, you know, you can get a septic system on. It does depend, you know, so how Mountain Septic handles it is we'll meet, you know, we offer to kind of quarterback the whole job for the clients. And so we coordinate with the engineer, either one of their choosing or one we recommend. And then we'll go out with the engineer. We dig the test pits. They need to dig 2-foot deep holes to get a soil analysis. And that gives us an opportunity to look and see, like, well, what is the digging like? Is it super rocky? You know, I mean, sometimes it is, sometimes you're on the side of a mountain and the digging's great. You know, it really just depends. And, you know, so as far as what to look out for, I mean, really, I'd just say find the property that you like. And you know, septic systems, you know, kind of for a full system, are going to run anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000, is what I've seen this year. You know, we had one that we installed recently. It was $48,000. The water table was 10 inches below grade. There were a lot of factors. It was a pressurized system. We had to bring in like $10,000 worth of clean washed concrete sand. So that one was pretty pricey, but it was some real tricky parameters we were working with. You know, on the flip side, I've seen a 3-bedroom system that, you know, was able to, the soil was great. It was able to be it was a smaller system, and it came in the low 20s. So I know that's a very broad range. But no honest installer can give you an exact number without engineered plans. So that's really the first step. If you like the property, you know, you can have a conversation with an engineer beforehand. But really, one is yours, getting an engineer on there, digging some holes, having them build out a system. Then you'll have, you know, plans that you can use to bid out the job, and hopefully Mountain Septic has a seat at the table.
Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you guys have any questions for Aaron or anybody else, or just any specific questions based on what I mentioned, please make sure to reach out, shoot me a comment, or just give me a call, text, or email. By the way, guys, as much as I love shooting these videos, I even love more helping you with your real estate needs. So like I mentioned a second ago, give me a call, text, or email. I'd love to hop on a Zoom call or just a regular phone call and just discuss what you're looking for, help you dial in your criteria, and really help you make it a phenomenal experience with moving here to Southwest Colorado. We cover this entire area from Pagosa to Mancos, Durango, just this entire area, and would love to help you out. We also have a team that covers the majority of Colorado. So leave this video a like, subscribe, and throw me a comment. I'd just love to hear what your thoughts were on this video, and if you had any questions. Looking forward to talking to you soon. See ya.